Do bear with me here. Okay, so welcome to Healthy Body, Healthy Mind, Mental Health Resilience. So today we're going to talk about problem solving, how to stop worrying about your problems and start solving them. Isn't that the dream, never to be worried about problems? Well, today I don't think we're going to solve all your problems, but I do think we'll get through some tools that will hopefully be helpful for you thinking about your problems and how you can solve them for yourself. So, of course, we deal with problems almost every day. Problems can be large, they can be small, and they can occur in all aspects of our lives and our personal lives and our work. And if we don't focus on resolving problems, and I think of them as kind of nipping them in the bud as quickly as possible, they often become bigger. So even problems that seem to go away sometimes come back to haunt us later. And over time, unsolved problems really can create a lot of stress in our lives and take a toll on our health and well-being. And unfortunately, just the nature of problems, sometimes we end up worrying about our problems, but being a little passive about them and not really actually doing much to solve them. Certain problems tend to bring out that side of us. And the worrying that we do when we have a big problem and we're not working to solve it is really unproductive. You tend to just go over and over and over it in your mind. And that actually tends to increase our feelings of anxiety and stress, quite ironically. So you may have heard the analogy like worrying is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't really get you anywhere. I like to think of that sometimes when I'm thinking about problems that I'm not really solving and I'm just spending a lot of time worrying and ruminating about. So if you find yourself spending a lot of time worrying about your current problems, it may be time to actually start solving more of them. And interestingly, just the way we are, if just that act of taking action and trying to deal with our challenges actually starts to address some of our worry and stress, even if it doesn't completely solve the problem. Just the act of trying to make an effort on its own can be helpful. And who knows, it may actually go a long way to solving your problem. So let's talk about the how-tos of problem solving. We all solve problems all the time using various strategies and approaches. How did we learn how to do this? Did anyone ever sit down and teach us how to problem solve? Most people, of course, would say no. Most people learn how to solve problems through experience and using strategies that have worked well for them in the past. So we often learn our problem solving skills when we're really young, although we do kind of develop them further and further over the lifespan. But we're not all good at solving problems. Most of us can handle the smaller day-to-day problems. We're familiar with them. We've handled them before. So we have probably already worked through this process. But the bigger and more complicated problems, especially new problems, and problems that are maybe a bit more emotionally laden, those can be harder to deal with. And many people find that when they feel stressed or overwhelmed, their problem-solving skills seem to suffer, and worrying tends to grow in its place. So, emotion and cognition are often inverse to each other. So, the more emotional we are, the harder it is to think through these things. But problem-solving is a set of skills. And that means it's actually something that you can learn and develop and get better at. You're not just sort of born with your innate problem solving skills and that's it, you're stuck with them forever. So working on improving your problem-solving skills can help you function better in all aspects of your life, including your job. And not only will it help you solve your problems more effectively, it may even reduce your stress level and make you feel more confident, which is nice. So today we're going to go through a 7-step model for problem solving. There are many different ways to solve a problem. There's not just one path to Rome, but all of them involve a series of steps. Now, we may not think of it that way because I don't think we're always aware that we're going through those steps. But today we're going to focus on this 7-step problem solving model, which may seem a bit like overkill, especially for smaller problems. However, it's worth giving the process a try, just because even if you start using this with smaller problems, it actually just gives you a bit of practice going through a bit more of a methodical step-by-step approach to coming up with solutions, which of course prepares you when you're dealing with a bigger problem in the future. And the more you practice, of course, the better you will be, and you'll move through the steps more efficiently and effectively. It won't always feel so cumbersome and slow. So the first step in the model is, of course, to identify the problem. Sounds easy, right? You know what the problem is. Well, of course, not always. And sometimes you may not really be clear on what the specific problem is. You may see kind of a collection of problems as just one huge problem. And so in order to solve a problem, you need to figure out exactly what that problem is. So we can start by making a list of the problems you need to fix. And so this can be related to any part of your life. And then you can review your list and decide on one problem you want to focus on. So now it's time, once you've picked your one, it's time to describe that problem. And you want to describe it as specifically as possible. So if your description of your solution, if your problem is too vague, it will be hard to know where your solution should start. So for example, if you identify your problem as something really vague, like my kids are driving me crazy, it's a lot harder to know where to start with that than if you managed to be a little more specific, like my kids are disorganized and don't listen to me when I ask them to get ready for school, and as a result, they are often late. That's a much more specific description. So to help you narrow down the problem, it can be helpful to ask yourself some questions, like, what is the situation right now? What is making me feel upset? What would I like the situation to be? And one aspect of this that I also really find helps with problem solving, the more we can focus on our part in the problem, so as opposed to kind of focusing on others and saying they're the problem, because it always feels like others are the problem. And it's not to say that they're not contributing and others aren't, playing their own part. But if we can get really focused on our part, that's the part we can control in the problem. And we always play a part, even if it's a small one. So I find asking myself, what's my part in this? How am I contributing to this problem is a difficult question, but a much more effective question in coming towards a solution. So next, after you've sort of identified your problem, you can start to explore your problem. So here are a few questions you can ask yourself that may make you help you think about the problem in different ways. And this process is just one step that can really help you come up with more kind of creative ideas for effective solutions. It sort of broadens your perspective on the problem. So how is this problem affecting me? How is the problem affecting others? Is this a problem for anyone else, or is this something that only affects me? And if so, what have I seen other people doing about this? And of course, are there any obstacles in the way of solving this? Like what is standing in my way? So you can, if you take the time, you can really flesh it out from there. There's all kinds of interesting information I think you can come up with if you ask these questions. And the next step is to start thinking about setting goals. So of course we think, okay, I've fleshed out the problem, isn't it time to start thinking about solutions? Well, not yet. Before you decide how you are going to solve the problem, it is really important to carefully think about it is exactly that you want to achieve. So this is especially true for bigger, more complicated problems. You think about the problem and what it is you want to achieve. It is time then to start narrowing down to your goals. So if your problem is, for instance, my job is very stressful, you may be tempted to say your goal is to reduce my stress at work. Now, of course, that's probably true, but it's not very helpful in terms of really setting a goal because it's still too vague and too general. So, how would you reduce stress at work? So setting goals can be a lot more effective, especially when we use the SMART principle. So the SMART principle is, I'm sure you may have seen it before or heard of it, but it's this idea of being specific, manageable, action-oriented, realistic, and timely. So when you think about you think about how you will know when you've reached your goal. And if you're having trouble with answering this question, you can work on defining your SMART goal so you feel clear and know when you've achieved it. Using the SMART principle can also be useful in determining what it is you want to achieve. It's also a helpful tool to use later when you're planning your specific solution. So I like this tool because it really pushes us to work a little harder at thinking about what we're trying to reach in working on this problem. And if we go through the SMART principle and examine, like if I say I have a goal, like I want to reduce my stress at work, well, if I go through the SMART principles, it's not specific, might be manageable, it is action oriented, it might be realistic, it's not timely. So it doesn't fit all of the criteria there. So I need to get more specific with that in order to be able to address it properly. So now, one of the things about now we're starting to look at solutions. And this is the time for brainstorming. The more possible solutions to find, the more likely it is you will find the most effective solution. So, different people have different ways of doing this. You can get a pencil and paper and start writing down potential ways you can solve the problem. You can make a mind map. People do that kind of thing, and that can be useful. So a few brainstorming tips are that it's easier to find a good solution when you have lots of different solutions to choose from. It doesn't matter whether the ideas are useful or practical at this stage. Just write down any idea that comes to you, and that can just kind of help get the creative juices flowing and lead you to new, more maybe creative solutions. And of course, you can always just throw away the bad ideas later. So you can also seek ideas about possible solutions by talking to others, gathering information from other trusted sources. And some solutions, of course, that seem silly at first may actually work when combined with other ideas. Now, the reason this step is helpful and important from a problem-solving standpoint is that it pulls us out of what's often the worrying, often the emotional aspect of the problem, which can give us what I would call tunnel vision. So usually we get really caught and we can't figure out how to solve a problem because either we are stuck on one potential solution that we feel seems unrealistic, or we just kind of go blank sometimes. But the idea is when there's stress involved, we become very narrow in our vision. That's the stress response, and that's how it functions. But it's not good. It's the antithesis really to creativity. So, if you can just take a breath, calm down, and think about different solutions from different angles, and see. I mean, I think it's great talking to other people. I think you sometimes have to be careful who you talk to about it. If they contribute to your stress, maybe that's not the right person, but they can maybe offer you alternative ideas you hadn't considered. And yeah, just be, have fun with it, almost be a bit of a dreamer. None of this has to be used. You're not committing to anything. So it's just a way of opening up the field of possibilities. Okay, so now you've gone through your brainstorming process. It's now time to select a possible solution. So you'll first review your list of possible solutions and think about which of these is most likely to give you the outcome that you want. So which ones are the most relevant to your solution? Which ones are the most manageable? What are the pros and the cons of possible different solutions? And if you think it might be helpful, review your possible solutions with a friend or a family member and talk about the possible outcomes for each of these solutions and about which ones might be the most practical or easy to implement. So going through the process of thinking about possible outcomes and advantages and disadvantages of your possible solutions will help you identify the solution that will probably work the best for you. So you can use the following questions as a guide to choose the best possible solution. So, will this help me reach my goal and actually solve the problem? Because remember, we've opened up a whole can of worms here. We don't want to get distracted and get focused on a goal that actually doesn't address the problem at hand. How good or bad will I feel if I choose this solution? Sometimes solutions can solve the problem, but end up making you feel unhappy. Now, my only bone to pick with this is sometimes there is a little bit of short-term pain for long-term gain. We have to think about whether we have to deal with some difficulty in the short term, which may not make us feel that great, but may actually lead to a better outcome down the line. And I think it's really important to take that into account. The next question would be, how much time and effort does this solution involve? Is this practical for me right now? Am I biting off more than I can really chew at the moment? Timing does matter because, it contributes to follow through. So if I don't actually have the energy and the bandwidth to deal with this right now, I'm much less likely to follow through with it and actually address the problem. And does the solution have more benefits than costs? So think about how your possible solution will affect you and others. Now, it's important to remember, of course, that a perfect solution rarely exists. There may be possible negative consequences to all of your possible solutions. Your job, though, is to pick a solution that is the best one for you right now with the most benefits and least costs. So it's a bit of an art form and not one you will likely get perfect every time. All right, and now we're in step 6, which is how you implement your solution. So after you've picked your solution, it's time to make a plan of action. So coming back to that SMART principle, specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, time-limited, make sure that your plan fits with these principles. So you're going to do a little bit of a critical analysis there. And then write down all the steps that it will take to carry out your solution. And honestly, even though it might seem cumbersome, the more micro you can get with it, the better. You will be more likely to take action if you know exactly what you need to do step by step. I think it also really helps with not getting overwhelmed, especially when you're dealing with a big problem that has an emotional side to it. You know, sometimes we aren't totally ready to carry out the entire action plan, but the fact that we're even just taking micro steps along the path is really useful, especially for preparing for when we might actually be ready to go through with the rest of it. Okay, so you're getting started on that. You're putting your solution into action. And so the final step in all problem-solving cycles is to evaluate the effectiveness. So basically, did your solution work? Once you've implemented your plan, you can determine whether you were successful in solving your problem. The answer is yes, way to go, that's awesome. If things didn't go as well as planned, then you may need to figure out what went wrong along the way. And you may need to revamp your plan or perhaps go back and choose a different solution and make a new step-by-step plan. So, you know, I would encourage you not to get discouraged if you have to go through all these steps more than once. Finding the right solution can be challenging, especially for more complicated problems. And I actually think, you know, I think most problems are, you know, some of them we address and they're gone and wow, amazing. But a lot of really complex problems take kind of multiple iterations before we really hone in on what we need to do. So if something, you know, you hit a roadblock or, you know, you get a piece of feedback that says you're going in the wrong direction, listen to that, you know, listen to that feedback, take it on board, don't take it as a failure. Just come back to your original cycle and think through, okay, how do I need to address this? And how do I integrate this new feedback that tells me that I've got to make some deviations in the way I was thinking about this. So to summarize, remember that problem solving is a skill that you can learn and you can get better at. It takes practice. The more you practice it, like anything else, the easier it will get. Problem solving is an active and often productive way of dealing with problems, whereas worrying is passive and often unproductive and gets us caught in that worry cycle. And problem solving tends to decrease feelings of stress and anxiety, whereas worrying tends to increase feelings of stress and anxiety. So just engaging in this process, quite honestly, is really, really useful for addressing addressing the worry, addressing the stress and anxiety. It engages a different part of your brain, and and helps you integrate information, and those are good things. Those are good things for getting you kind of out of that stress cycle and getting you back to where you need to be. Now, if you need more help and you're struggling with dealing with problems in your life, and you think you think it's kind of a little bit bigger than you can handle, talk to your family doctor. He or she can be helpful to connect you with resources. You can also look at resources available online through, there's a website here, www.bouncebackbc.ca, which is a cognitive behavioral therapy program. It's free. It's available to anybody in BC. So it's a really awesome tool if you're having a bit of a tough time. There's also www.anxietycanada.com. And of course, at Back in Motion, we offer psychological treatment and counseling. So you can always feel free to get in contact with us and see if there's a counselor available who can support you in whatever you're dealing with. As much as it's important to become self-reliant and work on your skills this way, sometimes it's just as important to know when something's a little bit beyond our capacity of figuring out on our own, and to reach out and to get help. There's absolutely no shame in that. Now, if anyone has any questions, you can enter them into the text box on your computer. And so, of course, if you'd like to send a private question, please send it directly to me as the host. And you can also feel free to email me any questions. My email address is Katrina, spelled CATRIONA.Remocker, REMOCKER, at backinmotion.com. I'm more than happy to answer everyone's questions, and we'll get back to you in a timely manner. So that's it for today. It was just a quick one, but I'm going to stop the recording now as we enter the Q&A period. And thank you all for joining, though it's been a good, interesting little session.